Hey guys. So I um I don't know why I wanted to do this one actually, but I think it was something I spotted in the text messages and I was like, "Oh, hello. What's going on here?" So, um I've done similar videos for Colin Hoover where I clearly say, yeah, I think there's a potentially a good claim against her for tortious interference. Taylor Swift, I was not so persuaded on. I think there may possibly be evidence that um could be enough. If that materializes, then great, then yeah, there is potentially, a claim. But on the evidence that's available right now, no, there's not enough to meet, like, as I said several times, this is a high bar, so, um, I can have an opinion on Taylor Swift and her involvement on this. Is it enough to meet the legal standard? No, and that's what I'm looking at this from. So, um, okay, we're doing Matt and Lucy Damon. That may surprise people. Why? Okay, because they went to the screening of the film, her friends and family thing, and there's obviously text messages between the Lively's and the Damons. There was also another text message which could have easily been overlooked, but I think is quite important, so we're gonna look at that. So my starting point is, as usual, is this is just based on a hypothetical situation. There's absolutely no signal from Wayfarer that they're going to actually initiate any of these claims. It's just well, what else is there out there that is potentially available to them? And we're looking at this under California law, because I believe that's if they were going to go down those routes, that's the law that they would claim under. Um, and obviously, as I've said before, it's my opinion. Other people may have a completely different opinion. It doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean they're right or wrong either. That's just, that's the whole purpose of why there are opposing sides that go to trial to argue and, bring forth their evidence. Um, okay, and obviously this is based on what is actually available. As I said, what we've seen is just exhibits that have been attached to particular motions. They have now been unsealed. This will not be the sum total of discovery. Far from it. It is probably literally the tip of the massive iceberg. I'm sure there's a lot more. So if there is any more that would solidify, um, or even, counter a possible claim, then, that is a possibility. But based on what is available, this is just my thought process. Matt and Lucy Damon, I think they probably piqued my interest the most, actually. Um, I I am still yet to do WME and Sony, but Matt and Lucy Damon, there's barely a mention of them in amongst all this. In the whole grand scheme of everything that's happened here, there is virtually, you know, well, there is no, I don't want to say there's virtually no mention. There is mention of them, very little, couple of communications, but I think they're important. So, okay, we're going to go through the same elements as we have done before. But I want to point out that unlike other players in this, Matt and Lucy Damon, um, I found this actually the easiest to frame legally. And there are a few things. They have no contractual role. They have no creative authority. Those are two very important things, right? So where Colleen Hoover is the author of the book and probably has some kind of contractual role, she was an executive producer, you know, she's kind of intertwined, as are Sony, as are WME. Taylor Swift, her song was used. We don't know how contractual that was. Um, Matt and Lucy Damon are the one set of parties in all of this who have nothing to do with this film, no role in it whatsoever, no authority. So that actually made this easier for me in many ways because I don't have to guess, well, is there a contract somewhere? No, it's not. There's not going to be. Okay. So element 1, as again, is there a contract? So we have covered this in and I will keep covering it in every video because it's a starting point. Is there a contract? It's on the screen now. Yes. Right. And this is the one contract we know about. There is obviously, as I said, there could be contracts between Justin Baldoni and as an individual with Colleen Hoover over the rights of the book. There could be contracts between Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios for the adaptation of what is his book rights, um, his role as a director, his role as an actor. All the contracts could be with It Ends With Us movie, um, because he would have had to contract for all of those roles. The fact that he is the head of Wayfarer does not mean that, there would not be further contracts needed, especially to be compliant with guilds, Directors Guild, SAG-AFTRA. You've got to do this. You've got to put everything in proper formal documents, which I will go through in far more depth when I do the Ryan Reynolds of all of this. But so our starting point is, yes, element 1 is, as with every other person I speak about, it's satisfied. Now, did they have knowledge of the contract? Of, like there was a bake-off? Well, I actually think they did. So these are these lovely text messages. I need to find it. I'm pretty sure she actually says directly, there's a bake-off. And there it is, actually found it. So Matt and Lucy Damon, they both work in the industry. They are well aware what a bake-off means. Blake Lively explicitly says we're in a bake-off. They will be aware of what that is. Okay, so and they will know that that is part of a contractual agreement. Matt Damon is he's an actor. I think he's a producer, and I think he's directed some films. Without looking that up, I'm not entirely sure, but he obviously knows the role inside out. I mean, they know the role so well that he's suggesting that she directs her next movie at Artists Equity. So they're actually saying, "Hey, how about coming over to us?" And Lucy Damon actually reiterates that. So, they have knowledge. I'm happy with that. I think in my opinion, I think I'm quite content that there is knowledge of a contract. They knew a decision was pending as well because, Blake Lively categorically says, "We're in a bake-off, which will happen in 12 days. This weekend screening is my chance to get the first and only feedback on my cut before the bake-off." Okay. So, in terms of knowledge, there was a lot. I mean, they knew there was competing cuts. They knew a decision was pending. Um, they knew the studio had not chosen yet, and they knew that potentially their input could influence the outcome. So, eh, even if they didn't know the exact terms of the bake-off, under California law, they're only required to have knowledge of the relationship, not the precise contract language, which they clearly had because Blake Lively just gave it to them. Okay. So the next element then, element 3, intentional acts designed to induce breach or disruption. And this is, for me, the strongest element. Is I'm sure with discovery, this would be easy to prove. So this in itself is not strongest proof, but this would lead to, like, if Wayfarer had filed their own complaint, we would get to discovery where this would be quite easy to find. This is text messages between Blake Lively and Taylor Swift. And it's so easy to miss this. Oh, Sorry, I'm trying to get us to it. Um, okay. And again, this supports the whole Colleen Hoover thing as well. This is the strongest evidence we have of in contractual interference. I didn't want to put this into the Colleen Hoover video because I wanted to surprise you all with it. I think people have missed this because no one's really talking about it. Blake Lively says to Taylor Swift, Matt and Lucy Damon saw it to give notes. That's her cut, yeah? And instead just wrote to Tim Rothman to try to push my edit through without a bake-off with Justin. Now, she also says that is also what Colleen is pushing for. But just to marinate that a little bit, Matt and Lucy Damon wrote to Tim Rothman to try to push Blake Lively's edit through without a bake-off. The bake-off that is contractually written into the agreement between Sony and Wayfarer. Who's Tim Rothman? Let's go to IMDb. Tim Rothman is the chairman of Sony Pictures Entertainment Motion Picture Group. This is the fucking chairman of Sony. Right? Above Ange Giannetti, above Josh Greenstein. And for me, this element, the intentional act designed to induce breach or disruption, is the strongest element we have, right? And this evidence is huge. They contacted the studio's chairman. Matt and Lucy Damon contacted the studio's chairman. They urged him to approve Blake Lively's cut. They did so before the bake-off, and they explicitly advocated for a non-contractual outcome. And I would argue that they used their industry influence to sway the decision. Now, whether Tim Rothman listened to them or not is neither here nor there. Right? They contacted the chairman of one of the signatories to the contract and said to him, "Look, ignore what you've agreed to, ignore your contractual obligation to Wayfarer, and just push through our friend's cut." That is direct intentional interference. And courts love facts like this because it's documented, it's deliberate, it's targeted, and this is timed to influence the contractual process. This is the heart, potentially, of a claim, and in my opinion, is one of the strongest claims of tortious interference here. So, then we have element 4, actual disruption. Well, possibly their lobbying contributed to Sony's coercive pressure on Wayfarer. We know there are other players in that. Blake Lively obviously leveraging Taylor Swift and Taylor Swift's song. We've seen Colleen Hoover. Sony admit that she was influential. Now, if Colleen Hoover is considered by Sony to be influential, is Matt Damon considered to be influential? I think he is. I think he is. And obviously, collectively, I mean, it'd be hard to pass out individually the impact, but collectively, there was a shift towards Blake Lively's cut. And at the very minimum, this compromised the neutrality of the bake-off. Even if they weren't the only cause, California law only requires that the interference was a substantial factor, and I believe that this would be. I think it would be. Damages. It would be the same as Colleen Hoover's, really. I believe that their interference may well have contributed to loss of creative authority, reputational harm to Justin Baldoni, economic harm to Wayfarer, a compromised bake-off, forced concessions. And I think that this would satisfy the damages element myself. again, I have to keep stressing this is just my opinion, but when you've got Matt Damon writing to the chairman of Sony and saying, "You need to use Blake Lively's cut. Don't worry about the Bake Off, forget it." Um, that kind of that is hugely um, that is a big interference, definitely. And it's definitely, it will have some sway, because you got big names. You got Matt Damon, and you've got Taylor Swift. Then you've got the book's author, Colleen Hoover. And we'll talk about WME as well. And that's my thought process. Um, in many ways, actually, this claim would be unusually clean because they had no contractual rights, no creative role. They had no business justification whatsoever. And the communication was directed at one of the contracting parties. Their request was explicitly to bypass the contractual process. Their influence was not, it was substantial and documented. And this is exactly the kind of conduct that California courts treat as actionable interference. So, yeah, I was quite excited to do this video. It's just my, again, my opinion. But buried in the little text messages there between Taylor Swift and Blake Lively was that. And I think this is so strong because if a claim was initiated in court and we got to discovery, the first thing that Wayfair are going to do, they're going to subpoena Matt and Lucy Damon. They're going to subpoena Sony and say, right, give me that letter. Either Blake is lying and exaggerating, which I don't think she is, or, the letter exists. All right. So, I will probably do Sony and WME for tomorrow. I've done the videos, but I will probably upload them tomorrow so it's not overloading. I'm going to also start covering, and this is absolutely nothing political whatsoever. It's just out of interest. It's the lawsuit, um, the Trump versus the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. I'm just purely interested in what the complaint says, what the response says, and there was a recent motion for stay of discovery, which was denied. So I'm probably just going to do read throughs, but I have no political opinions on Donald Trump at all. So I welcome either side. And I'm just purely interested because obviously being British, the BBC, I don't love the BBC's reporting. I find it very biased and disingenuous at the best of times. But I am curious to see what happens here. Same as Candace Owens. I had no opinion of Candace Owens particularly. I hadn't watched a series on the Macrons. I certainly have no love for the Macrons either. But I am curious to see how these lawsuits pan out. So for that reason, I will be covering that lawsuit, but I won't be it's nothing to do with being a particular political affiliation. All right, so I'm going to leave that there. I hope you found this one interesting because I think this was the unexpected surprise that that no one saw coming. But I think actually this is the strongest claim in many ways, other than Blake Lively herself and Ryan Reynolds. um, excuse me, sorry. I think this is definitely one of the strongest claims out of all the side actors. So let me know what you think, though. I am curious.